Hello, nerdy romantics. OMG, I'm so excited. Gosh, I always say I'm so excited, but I really am excited for this one. OMG. We are talking about James Gunn's Superman today. And I have with me Staci, Jen, Perry, my guest host today to talk Superman. So everybody just lock in. This is going to be a really, really good discussion.
This is the Nerdy Romantics Podcast, and I'm your host, Y.M. Nelson.
All right, everyone. How are y'all doing today?
So good. So
Doing
happy to
good.
be here and to talk to you about this.
Right. I'm so happy that y'all are here because I tell you, I said immediately when this came out that I wanted to see it. And when I went to see it, I did go with a friend and I talked with that friend, but I was like, I really want to talk like nerdy comic book. I just want to just really just go off and talk. And so I'm so happy to finally talk about this one with some nerdy comic book folks or just comic folks. All right. So we are going to talk everything James Gunn Superman. And first off, because I've already said I went and see it with a friend, I did go to the theater when it came out. How about everybody else? How did we come about this? Were we excited to see it? What was going on when it first came out? Or did you just wait until it came on HBO Max, which is where it's currently airing? Jen, what about you?
Oh, I was 100% in, 100% in to go see this. I was a little cautious because I know I really liked Henry Cavill as Superman. I think as
Right, Henry.
an actor, I think he's a great guy. And also the little that I know about him kind of behind the scenes, I think that there's a lot of I was like they really chose a great guy for this. But I loved Superman back when Christopher Reeve was Superman, and I especially loved Lois Lane in that movie. And so it was very high on our list. Like, we wanted to go opening weekend. My husband and I on more than one occasion have been Superman and Lois Lane for Halloween. This is a big deal for us.
Love this.
So we saw it in the theater on the big screen, and then I watched it again in preparation for this because I haven't seen it in a couple months. So
Mm-hmm. Staci, what about you? How did you feel going in? Did you see it in the theater?
So I wanted to see it when it was in the theaters, but I think it came out like my birthday week. And I don't know what happened. I just didn't go and see it. And then it just kind of dropped off my radar for the whole thing until we said that you were going to do this. And I was like, before you said that or mentioned it, I saw it on my Amazon Prime. Hey, Superman's going to be coming, whatever, whatever. And I was like, well, let me go ahead and see it. And I really forgot this podcast was this Friday because I wanted to kind of go back and see some of the previous Supermans. Like, I mean, I remember Christopher Reeve. I remember the other ones, but the one before Henry Cavill, that one, I was trying to see just the different versions that they've had over the years and compare that. And I was going to do that this weekend. It's like, oh, I got the little notification that this was this one. It's like, well, I can't watch those other ones again. But I am excited about it. I was excited about it, but not like really overly excited. I wanted to see it because I remember Christopher Reeves. That was my first Superman experience, the music and the soundtrack and all that. So I was really excited, but I'll be honest, I have not been really excited to go into movie theaters for a while now.
Yeah.
But when it did come out and see it on my TV, we can go about how we thought of the movie in general, but I watched it on my TV and I didn't go to the movie theater to watch it.
mm-hmm.
Perry, what about you? Did you go to the movie theater? And how excited were you to see this? And was this on your radar? It was definitely on your radar. What am I talking about? We talked
Yeah,
about it as Superman and Lois. You were like, "Are you going to see this?" I was like, "Okay."
I think I may have already seen it when we did that at last episode, if I'm recalling the timelines correctly.
Yeah, yeah.
No, we did it. It was like just before it came out. Yeah, but as you know, I host my own superhero podcast, and Superman's my favorite character. I'm a frequent guest on a Superman podcast, so I was totally on board for this, and I love James Gunn. Like the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy is, the best trilogy of the MCU. And his, the Suicide Squad that he directed, and Peacemaker. I was not expecting to like Peacemaker, but that show blew me away. I still got to see the new season, actually, because it just finished. So when they announced that James Gunn was taking over and like rebooting the DC movies, I was so psyched because I thought you could not have gotten a more perfect person. And when the first trailer came out and we saw the first images, I'm like, oh, he's not doing we're gonna make this ground and everything. He's leaning full on into the comic booky wacky sci-fi stuff. And I saw it in the theater, went opening night, went to a late showing, and I loved it. I've seen it like 3 or 4 times since then. Only in theater one time, but since then I've seen it like 3 or 4 times on VOD. And yeah, amazing. I loved it.
When you went to see it in the theater for that, was it packed?
Not really, because there's the Japanese theaters, there's not a whole big showing for Western movies. Like they're at least not in my area.
Right.
So it wasn't packed. There was a decent amount of people there for a late showing though, but I wouldn't say it was packed.
Yeah, I always wondered, like, culturally, like, what the theater experience? What's the difference?
Well, one of the big differences is that in Japan, the audiences, they don't react at all. Like it's so quiet, you can hear a pin drop. So the only exception was Avengers Endgame, when Cap shouted Avengers Assemble. That was the only time I could think of when people reacted in a movie in Japan.
Wow. Oh my gosh. It would be crazy if they went to, I'm not gonna, no, this is not a stereotype or anything, but when my family and my friends get together for a movie, that's all I'm gonna say to that. But anyway, let's actually get into the movie. Perry, you mentioned and yes, we have our Superman shirts on here. But yeah, Perry, you mentioned, James Gunn getting into the whole comic book kind of feel of it. And that's kind of how I felt as well, even though everybody knows I say this on every superhero thing that we do. I consider comic books canon, and I've watched a lot of animated stuff, but I am not a comic book reader. So, there's a little bit there's a little bit of disconnect there, but not a lot of disconnect. But I do remember thinking when I first saw it, I think, the whole comic book kind of feel was coming out of it. And seeing Superman in the blue, the real that with the logo, it was giving me, even if I didn't know the comic books, I knew that he knew the comic books and that he was coming from a place of reverence for the comic books. Did you feel that way? Or, did we all feel that way? How did we
100%.
feel? Yeah. Yeah.
And
go ahead, Staci. No, go ahead, Staci.
I never read the comic books, but when I saw this version of it, it brought me more to the Christopher Reeves version of Superman versus anything else. And I thought it felt more, I guess, wholesome looking.
Yes.
Before I even watched it, I was like, okay, it looks brighter. The other one was truly, the other ones in the past, not saying they were bad, but they were like, it's a dark, dirty world. And this is Superman. Versus this one seems more lighter, brighter. It made me feel like more of the Christopher Reeves, like back when I was a kid, kind of a thing. It made me feel more nostalgic than Henry Cavill. Not saying that Henry Cavill, that his version wasn't good, but it brought me to a different place than this version, which made me feel a lot more like nostalgic for when I was a kid, the first time I'm watching it, of watching Superman.
Right.
Yeah.
Jen, you also mentioned Christopher Reeve was kind of your first experience. Did you feel the same way, or
No, I
how did
totally
you
agree
feel?
with what Staci is saying. Is that I feel like we kind of harken back more to that time of that type of Superman, where the Henry Cavill and the Justice League movies we've had in the last few years, they went to a really dark place, and dark and brooding in ways that were, it was fine. It was fine. Like I said, I enjoyed them. I enjoyed them for what they were. But this one sort of brings us back around to the light and bright again. There are so many shots of the blue sky. It's a very blue, blue, blue. When he's flying through the air, the clouds are beautiful. There's just something there's very pretty. The sky is really pretty.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I had the same kind of feeling too about, I was very excited for it to be in the hands of James Gunn. I really loved the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and I felt like that was a property that I knew absolutely nothing about. Nothing. I'm also not a comic book reader, but I loved that he made something that was kind of unknown to a lot of us into something that was super fun, super identified with the characters. So I was very interested to see what James Gunn was going to do with the Superman property and where he was going to take it, especially as he's like completely relaunching the whole DCU and where that's going to go. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Eerie, if you can piggyback on that and also bring in kind of what you thought from a comic book perspective of what you saw, and
Yeah.
the James Gunn
Yeah,
kind of
I'm
feel that.
I'll totally co-sign all of that. I mean, my thoughts, the Snyder films with I thought, first off, Henry Cavill got robbed. I think that's something we can all acknowledge, because
We do. Yeah.
he wanted to play like the more hopeful Superman, and he was hoping to get to that point, and he was just never gotten the opportunity to, and then he got used as a pawn in Dwayne Johnson's power play for control over and it was just, I think he could have done it. Right. In the Josh Whedon cut of the theatrical cut of Justice League, we saw like these brief flashes of what he could have done. And if you've seen him in other movies like Man from U.N.C.L.E. or Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, like the dude oozes charm. So I think he could have done a really great job. So I feel really bad for him.
Even in The Witcher, when he's supposed to be grumpy in The Witcher, he's amazing. He's hilarious. He's a charmer. And yes, he could have done it. I agree.
I'm hoping he gets James Bond now, but that's another story. But with this, yeah, it definitely harkened back to Christopher Reeve, to also the comics, which was a much more hopeful version. The idea of this guy who just wants to do the right thing. And the thing about Superman is you can modernize Superman. You can put Superman in a dirty world, but you shouldn't have the world dirty up Superman. Superman should be that beacon that shines in the darkness. And I think that's what this movie really brought out. And one of the things that I like about it too is, even though David Cornsweet, like there's shared DNA between his Superman and Christopher Reeve's, he's not doing like a Christopher Reeve impersonation, which was what Brandon Routh was forced to do in Superman Returns. He is doing his own version of Superman, and it's a more human version of Superman, right? This is a Superman who makes mistakes, who, loses his temper, who, and if I have one criticism of Christopher Reeve's Superman, it's that he was too perfect. Right. He was whereas David Cornsweet is a Superman who feels like an actual human. So I really like that aspect of it too.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. I agree with everything and everybody's saying right now. It gave me that hopeful, bright feeling. Even the intro, when the Superman graphics come on, it gives you that whole. It's like, yes, this is James Gunn. Yes, we're in a good place right now. It was feeling all, retro-y 80s kind of feel, but at the same time, not. It was very much hopeful and bright. And Jen was talking about how the sky was bright, and I didn't even think about that until just now. But even when he's sitting there, and I probably should have said spoiler alert, but everybody knows I'm gonna spoil everything all the time. So, but when Superman is with Lois and they are in that rough patch kind of conversation, and the Justice Gang is fighting that tentacly thing. Even that is like, it's like aurora borealis. The
Yeah.
colors are
Yeah.
everywhere, and it's just so, it's like, okay, this is supposed to, we're supposed to feel sad, this is supposed to be not a good thing. But it's funny how that works though, because James Gunn puts the sad when you're supposed to feel sad, right?
Yeah.
When there's no color at all, you know this is not a good place. And then there's even some like a few scenes that are kind of like muted, and then at the end there's kind of a muting, kind of the color kind of mutes a little bit when things are coming apart, literally.
Mhm.
So James Gunn makes you feel all the feels, and I felt all the feels with this.
Yeah.
And there's mention of Guardians of the Galaxy, and I think I'm like Jen, Staci, I don't know if you feel the same way about Guardians of the Galaxy being something that you didn't really know the characters until you saw.
Didn't know them at all until
Yeah.
they first came in. I was like, who are they? And I think,
Right.
but he did a good job because I actually liked the whole series and never knew anything about
Mhm.
any of those characters.
Exactly. And I felt the same way. It's like I was having all of the feelings with Guardians of the Galaxy.
Mhm.
I felt all the feelings, but I was rooting for these people, and I didn't even know these people to begin with. It wasn't like I was going into this thinking, yes, like we went into Iron Man in the beginning thinking, we know Iron Man. We're ready to see what Robert Downey Jr. is going to do with this. I went into Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't know any of these people. I know the actors. And I'm thinking, this is probably going to be fun. But then the James Gunn factor just ratcheted it up. And so when I heard that that's who was going to do the reboot of the DC, I was like, of the DCU, DCEU, whatever they call it. When he was going to do that reboot, I was like, I'm going to miss him from Marvel, but I'm ready for this. This is going to make me like DC, whereas before I kind of liked it, but I liked it because I wanted to see what they were going to do with the characters. But
Yeah.
I agree that everything was a little bit darker. And
Mhm.
now James Gunn has brought the light, and I'm ready to see where this goes. But one thing and y'all, I'm throwing this at you, and you didn't know that I was going to say this, but one thing that I noticed that he did not do, even though I felt, and Perry, you could correct me on this, I felt this was really close to the comics, especially with some of the things that were brought out. One thing that he really did not do, that some people were just like, why didn't he do it, was tell us this origin story. We got 5 minutes with some words at the beginning before we actually see Superman. But we
Mhm.
didn't get that origin story told over again. We didn't get Smallville in a big way. We just got a visit to Smallville, and we didn't get any of those other kinds of, we even got Lex Luthor in a different way than we usually do. So, Harry, what did you think about that? Because I know some people who maybe have a limited kind of feeling about Superman were just like, why didn't we tell the origin story? And I'm thinking, we didn't need to tell that. But
There,
what did
there
you
are
think?
there are 3 origin stories that we never have to see on film again: Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man. Right? We know all 3.
Yes.
Like my mother is like 70. She has never read a comic book in her life. She has never sat through a Superman movie. She's never sat through a single episode of any Superman TV show. She knows Superman's origin, right? This is like encoded into our cultural DNA at this point. If you don't know what Superman's origin story is, you must be like, have grown up on an island somewhere isolated.
Exactly. And so
Yeah.
that's why I'm glad that it didn't start that way. Stacy, what did you think about that? And are we glad how it started?
It
Are we
wasn't. I have to agree with
glad?
her. It's not needed. It was not needed
Yeah.
at all. If you don't know by now who Superman is, I mean, it didn't need all that. We already know Superman came from a different planet. I mean, who does not know that? And if they don't, you got a little blurb about it. You don't have to waste all that time to go over his origin story at this point. Now, when we were watching like Christopher Reeves back in the day, because that was what, the 80s?
Yeah.
I can see
70s and
that
80s, maybe.
78.
something like
Yeah.
what was a pair make me feel old? Say that again.
78.
And no, I didn't see it in the theater. So there.
Yeah, so but I remember seeing it, maybe not in theaters, but I remember seeing it.
Mhm.
And okay, most definitely not in the theaters. I don't remember seeing it, but I mean, you remember it, but every movie that they've had, they show that. And then not even just the movies, they had the TV shows. And then they have Smallville. The whole thing was about when he was there in Smallville. You really don't need that. And because of time constraints and all that, I would rather go into the meat of the movie than regurgitate something that's been done, just so many times already.
Mhm.
And I think that would have been a waste of time if you're going to show that original again. I'd
Mhm.
rather you go with the story. I don't need to see how he came. We already know because there was already Smallville, there was Krypton, there was a whole slew of stuff about the early days or how he got here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, which makes me wonder why in the world people are like, because we know this story, why in the world are people like up in arms because we mention in this, one of the themes in this is that Superman is an immigrant. So that's one thing that was really brought out in this particular version of Superman is that he's an immigrant, and people are just like up in arms. And I'm thinking, but you know the origin story. I mean,
They didn't even change the origin story. His whole origin story would make him an immigrant. So I'm
Not just an immigrant, a refugee. He's
a
literally
refugee.
a refugee.
Yes, a refugee
Exactly.
because his planet destroyed. So why I didn't see it when it came out in theaters, but I did hear about that, and I was like, they need to change the canon of the story. So why are y'all upset? And I mean, I just have to think about what's going on in the world. That's probably why.
Yeah.
But the thing is, they hadn't changed the story. They never changed it. He was always an alien that happened to land in America. That was it. That's
Right.
his whole story. We've all known that. If you know the Superman story, then you know that's what he did. That's what happened. So why get upset unless you? Well, we know why. So keep on.
Yeah.
We know why.
It's all just part of the it's all the feeding the internet outrage machine. That's all. In fact,
Yeah.
all these people who are complaining about this, I guarantee you they have never read a Superman comic book in their life. They've probably never even watched a Superman movie. I mean, Dean Cain, worst Superman ever, has clearly never read a Superman. I'm not even sure if he can read, honestly. So
But I don't know. I mean, I don't understand. I didn't. Well, no, that whole thing, what was going on with it is just that was Superman to begin with.
Yeah.
there's also
exactly.
a big, like, I see this all the time. It drives me nuts when I see this happen because people are saying that they hate when comic books go too woke. Superman has always been woke. He was created by two impoverished Jewish kids as a way to combat like the rising threat of fascism. He was literally, in his early appearances, he was going after slumlords and crooked politicians.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah. And and like a few people that I've seen have said, people are like, when did Superman become an immigrant? When did the Superman comic become woke? And they were like, in 1930, blah, 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 whenever the first comic came out. It was like, duh. But it's so funny how there's such a disconnect between the actual story that's there and what people want to see. I agree. There are a lot of people out there talking junk that don't know anything about Superman
Yeah.
at all. But then there are a lot of people talking junk because in their minds, they're thinking one thing and they're seeing one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, they are blocking out a lot of other stuff. You
Yeah.
know, you see Christopher Reeve, you see what he looks like, you maybe identify with that look, and maybe you think, okay, yeah, he is all for XYZ. He's got on blue and red, so he's all about this. You know what I'm saying? And
Mhm.
so you block out the whole backstory of who Superman is and what he's about and what he's actually doing, you
Mhm.
know? And then get upset when somebody actually says, well, this is what Superman is about because here's the comic books, here. And, another thing about, I feel like I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but it's kind of connecting in my mind. Another thing that is kind of a comic book, maybe staple, maybe that we didn't realize. And I'm going to ask Perry to maybe confirm or deny what I'm thinking here is the whole message that Superman's parents sent with him. Was that in the comic, kind of how that was done in the movie, or is it different? Or I've heard
Yeah,
things
was
and
he
seen
sitting there to
things.
create a harem? Perry.
Oh
No,
yeah,
that
not
was
the harem part. No, but I meant the other part. I don't know about the fact that he didn't hear the other part, or the fact that the other part was there and he didn't know it was there, or was there even another part, or was that all for the movie?
pretty much all. It's like in the comics, there have been many different versions of the origin
Yeah.
story. So there have been some where, like, you actually never had the AI Jor-El thing, like from Marlon Brando, and that was not from the comics. That was all creation for Superman 78. So that was never
For
in the
that,
comics.
okay.
So you never had that kind of thing where you had like this personal relationship with his father or anything like that. In most iterations, it is basically just a message, and the message and it's Jor-El is always pretty much. There's some recent retcons and stuff that have brought the character back, and it's a whole comic book mess thing, so I'm not going to get into that. But for the most part, Jor-El is mostly a benevolent character, and there are two basic versions of the message of the, like, it's one where it's like, it's like the last chance, and they're just he knows where he can send the baby, and he knows like it's a habitable world that he'll be strong there and all that. But the whole idea of serving humanity and all that, sometimes that's present, sometimes that's not. So that's not always a thing. Mostly it's just that. And you've had different versions where, like, in Smallville, they kind of hinted that for a while that Jor-El had like sinister motivations to send Kal-El out to Earth, but then they ended up trying to change that around. It was just like covered up as like misinterpretations. The recent My Adventures with Superman had a little bit of that in there too. But yeah, from the comics, that's not really been there. And that was one of the problems. I had a few issues with this movie, and that was one of them. I didn't like the idea of Jor-El and Lara telling him to like rule over humanity. And my own headcanon is that there is some manipulations going on with the message, and that's not actually, or like misinterpretations, or I think, and this could be a through line that happens in other movies going forward, right? So we'll see what
Yeah.
happens in other movies. But my headcanon right now is that Luther tampered with the message.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, that's kind of what I felt as well. And to me, it also kind of goes with the narrative of kind of what they're doing by bringing in the Luther bots
The
talking,
engineer.
right, and the engineer, but also the bots online that are,
We're trolling Superman.
yeah, right, and doing the hashtags and all that stuff, actually showing how misinformation can create fear.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And I think kind of that's part of that. And, you mentioned AI, so, there's a whole.
Honestly, that is 100% where I thought they were going.
Yeah.
And I was really thrown by everybody like, oh no, I know those tech guys. They wouldn't lie about that. And it's like, where is that evidence? There's nothing. There's no evidence.
Right. Yeah.
There's no reason to believe that to
Then
be
Mr.
true.
Terrific said it, and I'm
There's
like,
no-
oh no.
I know, like I was like, Mr. Terrific, you of all people know that is absolute crap that's coming out of your mouth. No, there's no such thing as like, well, we know this to be true. No, until you have the actual file in your hand to decode it, then you might have some version of that. But so for me, like, speaking of some of the problems that I had, that was one of them, is that I felt like they were setting us up to get a misinformation storyline, and that's not where he was going. And because he wasn't going that direction, I felt like that interpretation of the video from his parents was created so that he could have a conversation with his Earth dad about, you get to choose who you are, right?
Plot
And
device.
I feel like that was the solve to get to that conversation. They had to create some sort of, you choose who you are. And that bothered me. I didn't like that sort of triangulation of that, because there's lots of ways that you can make Superman into a bad guy, and change public opinion about him. I thought they might be going there with damage. There's a few times when it's mentioned, oh, that was probably $12 million of damage. You have the big, whatever that creature was, I don't think it ever got a name, but the big creature that is like stumbling around the city, and
the thing.
It looked like Stitch.
yeah,
It
it looks kind of like Stitch. Like
It
Stitch
did.
hasn't showered in a month. Is kind of what that looked like. So I thought, yeah. So we had that, and so then the news, the news that's like in the little corner has a little conversation about the dollar amount of damage, and then how the city is broken, and this building got broken, and and kind of the superhero damage cost and insurance rates or something like that is going to come up more so than, yeah. So it kind of took a weird turn for me, especially with the whole, like, have a bunch of wives and, like, make sure that our
Right.
I'm like, that
Repopulate
got weird.
Krypton here on Earth.
That
What?
got super weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Superman's version of the Epstein files.
Oh my God.
Ooh, well, Staci, tell us more about what you think.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just thinking that I want to ask, like, for prepared, when did they start filming this? Because I was, like, when they filmed it and then when it was released, and their expectation of what was going to be happening in our world at that time. And they may have been like, oh, we didn't expect this. I don't know. But when watching this, and also like the whole thing about the misinformation about Superman, I was like, okay, I don't know how you can make this not political or somewhat about what's going on here. I mean, in this case, we see Superman and like metahumans and how that distrust of someone who came here from outer space. We see that in Lex Luthor, and he's trying to do all that he can to make sure that everyone hates this group of people just like he does. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to put into words what I want to say without being.
Well, okay. How about I say this, and then maybe this will dislodge some stuff. So, Perry, I'm going to ask the same thing. When was this filmed? Because I felt the same way. What I felt like when I watched it, I felt like I was basically looking at the news that was going on, right? And that is still going on. And I'm thinking to myself, now this had to have been pre-election, right?
Yeah,
when they filmed this, at least pre-election when they filmed this. Even we're going to say even pre Kamala Harris gets in the election when they filmed
it was.
It's way in the,
Principal photography began February 29th, 2024, according to Wikipedia. and filming in studios in Atlanta begun by March 8th, and filming wrapped on July 30th. So I think, I'm not sure when
July
did
30th, 2024.
Yes. So I'm not sure when exactly. So I think that was right before Biden dropped out of the election, if I'm getting my timeline correct.
It is, because I think Kamala says she had 107 days. That's about
Yeah.
3
Yes, sir.
months.
So it's
That's
like
right there. It's
June,
right
July.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And
so the thing is,
but pre-production actually began in 2023 too. So, but this stuff was all in the air too, like going all the way back to the whole the DeSantis stuff and all that kind of stuff. So the whole anti-immigrant, the xenophobia was hanging around in the air. Obviously, the social media stuff. I don't think we had quite gotten into like the AI stuff when they started writing it. Maybe if he had written it, I think that was probably about like around the same time that AI started to become a big thing. So if this had happened, I think if he had written it now, that you might have had some stuff with like AI generated footage being introduced or something like that. Which, yeah, but I was with Jen on that. Like I was hoping that was what we were going for, but I guess I didn't like that part of it that we did that, because I'm all for elevating Jonathan and Martha Kent. I feel like the movies often they kind of downplay the Kents in favor of like putting more of the focus onto Jarrell. And so I'm all for elevating that aspect of the relationship, because that whole nature versus nurture aspect, that is key to Superman's character, right? That's key to the immigrant story, right? He came here as a baby. He knew nothing. He was a dreamer, basically, right? Essentially. And so he comes here, and then he is raised, he's shown love by the native people, by the, not native people, but you know what I mean, the, natural born American citizens. And then he inherits their values. He ends up adopting it as his own place. He ends up assimilating. Like that's the immigrant story. And I think that aspect of it is so key to his character. So I'm glad that they elevated the Jonathan and Martha of it, but I didn't like it that they were doing it at the expense of tarnishing up Jor-El and Lara.
Right. And maybe this is just also me picking out kind of what I want to see a little bit too. But, every time we've seen like a picture of Jor-El and of his parents, or even like in Superman and Lois, where they were very interactive, with the holograms of his parents, it seemed like they wanted the best for him. They just couldn't give him the best for him because they were on Krypton. They had to send him off. They couldn't leave with him. But to do one thing to
the other.
I don't think I like that either. That vision of that. And then too, this is part of this iteration of the story that also kind of weirds me out. But yeah, so Staci, I don't know if that dislodged anything that you may have wanted to say.
That didn't dislodge anything, but it did make me think, because when y'all were talking about how they did his Kryptonian parents and everything, and it's like as soon as Gary said that they couldn't get the last of that recording, that it was whatever, I was like, something's gonna happen. Something's gonna be with that footage. And I mean, I kind of thought something was gonna happen, or it's gonna show more or something like that. But I didn't expect them to do that. They were the evil Kryptonian kind of a thing going on.
Right.
But
well, there's also the fact that we have Supergirl in this, and Supergirl was raised on Krypton. So if that's so, I feel like there's some here's kind of like my theory, because the rumor is that the next movie, Man of Tomorrow, is going to feature Superman and Luthor teaming up against Brainiac. And so my theory is maybe Brainiac had manipulated the message somehow in transit. And because he says the ship was damaged in transit, so I wonder if that was Brainiac. And so if this is like Brainiac this was his attempt to try and manipulate Superman. So that's kind of like where my head is going right now. We'll see if that ends up being the case.
Ooh. Okay. This is making me feel a little bit better about the way that storyline is going. But yeah, getting to kind of what Staci may have been alluding to, there are a lot of very obvious things that are happening in this particular movie, which is funny because nobody really talked about the obvious stuff that's happening in this movie. Instead, they're talking about Superman is an immigrant and getting all crazy about that. But there's obvious stuff happening in this movie that just, this is the modern is where the story is and how the story plays out. The whole Jarnpur and Baravia, that whole conflict speaks to Gaza and Israel right now. I mean, the whole Pocket Universe / Fort Kramer, is very alligator Alcatraz looking, which is so weird. That's so creepy weird. The raptors swooping in on cities is very much like what we're seeing now in Chicago and Portland. Is, were y'all as weirded out by this as I was? And I think this, Staci, this may be where you're going. Were you weirded out about this as I was?
Really weird. That's why I was wondering when it was actually, being produced and created. Because it's like some of the stuff is happening that's to me so similar. In a way, it's like, what did they know? I mean, what did they actually see? Because it's just some of the things that are happening now, and we're seeing it, a movie version of it in a way.
Yeah.
And just to kind of backtrack a little bit about them not showing his origin story, which I was glad of. I'm glad they skipped over a lot of stuff that they had in the previous version about him and Lois, and spoiler, they already together and she already knows who he is. And I'm glad they skipped over that, because usually when they show that in earlier versions of movies, it's like half the movie, him trying to hide that from her, and we don't need all that. So we kind of went straight into what for previous movies would have been like the center of the movie to the end, and we started with that at the very beginning. But I mean, it's just to me that the whole concept that kind of still going back about that of him being woke, that just still bothers me. I mean, every time I think about it, it's like that was his origin story, that he came here from someplace else. And the fact that it was how he was raised that he became the person he is. And I always thought that they always concentrate on his Kryptonian family, but I did like the fact that they talked about his parents here. Now I can't remember the name of the parents. I should know those right off the back of my head.
Jonathan and Martha.
Jonathan
and Martha.
And I was like, why, I always thought that they always kind of, in the movies, they kind of glossed over them in a way. And they did kind of gloss over them a bit here. And they made them ultra wholesome. But I like that about it in this movie, because the whole movie was wholesome. But I like the fact that they kind of showed where he came from in that sense, and that he was a regular kid, but not concentrate the whole movie on how he was an outsider because he could do all this stuff. They told him he couldn't do it, but when you saw his room, he had the posters on the wall. He had little awards for whatever. You could tell that they treated him and they raised him like he was just a regular kid. And the fact that he became Superman raised here versus if you watch Brightburn, it didn't become a little monster in Brightburn, which is the dark Superman, the darkest Superman movie kind of a thing. If you ever watch that.
And Gunn produced that, by the way.
Oh, really?
I didn't know that.
Oh my.
But
Wow.
Brightburn, you like seeing that, what Superman could have been and how he is, it is really a big difference. If you haven't seen Brightburn, you should see it just for that. But I mean, I've really just all the things that you said that's happening, like when we saw the trolling of Superman, in the his conversation with Lois, basically interview him like she would interview anyone else, and how he became defensive about certain things. What I'm supposed to do, and it's like that's the whole thing. You can do this. You're doing, she wouldn't say he was doing the wrong thing, but the fact is that he was making decisions about what's happening all in the world without anyone's input, and how that is a slippery slope. Like, we know that he's doing a good job, but at the same time, at what point could it be that he's going to go down a dark path? I mean, we don't. It's Superman, and hopefully it's good when we won't get that. But at the same time, how easy it is for someone to slip and slide with all that power.
Yeah, exactly.
And I may have
Exactly.
gone all off topic now. I'm just talking.
No, it's totally fine. But you say something too that makes me think. On the other side of that, Lex Luthor was given all of this power and had a warped vision of what to do with it, and then wanted to take some more power by taking half of Darnpoor to be his own and things like that. And two, him with the whole pocket universe makes me think about how when people take power and
Put them in jail
they
without due
don't
process.
right, exactly. Put them in jail without due process, but also how they don't know what they're doing. Because when Mr. Terrific goes in and he says, "Oh, who created this pocket universe?" and they don't know what they're doing. And it's like, it also makes you feel like we need to have people who know what they're talking about as well. If you're going to be given power, you need to also kind of know what you're talking about, because a lot of stuff is happening here, and it's because people have power, like Lex has this power, but is using it in ways that really you need to be more educated to use this, right? You shouldn't be putting people in a pocket universe just because you didn't like what they said, right? You know, but yes. And then too, some other things that were kind of happening that were just weird when he got arrested and he was like, "Are you gonna read me my rights?" Didn't get his rights read because we didn't feel like he needed rights. So, you know, all of this is kind of going through my mind. And I'm kind of thinking, whoa, this is really weird. But nobody said anything about it, right? Do we see what's that? But nobody said anything about it. Instead, they want to say some stuff about him being woke. And I'm with you, Staci. That was what was making me angry. I'm like, now how is this even something that we're gonna rage bait over? You know, why are we putting rage bait out over this when there's so much other stuff?
I think so. The rage bait is, I think, exactly the right terminology. This is just me. I do not have data or anything like that, but I think that they chose a couple of keywords that would inflame people. And there were some bots that sort of helped to amplify some of that messaging, that especially about the word immigrant. And because we've seen that happen in other situations where you feel like something's really, really, really blown out of proportion. A lot of times there might be a person or a company behind it that is paying to have the noise created, which is just, it's a fascinating part of the way that social media works now. That is different than maybe what it was 10 years ago. And so it makes us always need to question, where is the noise coming from? Where exactly is that noise coming from? Even when something goes viral, you can, something goes viral and then it gets quiet, right? It goes up and down. So when something is in the zeitgeist for longer than a few days, you kind of go, who is driving this? And why is it continually? Because famously, we have a very short attention span.
Very.
And so I do kind of question where and why, why did they pick the immigrant word, right? Well, immigration at the time was and is continually a whole conversation. And even before the last couple of years, there was a lot of discussion about immigration in Europe, and that was about the boats of immigrants that were trying to escape from one area to the other area, and how people are treated. There's a lot of conversations in a lot of countries about what that really looks like and how that plays out. So I think that that part of the story for James Gunn, as he was doing the writing part of it, would make sense.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think that's why that word came up so
Mhm.
clearly once the movie was released.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Mhm.
I got something to say about this with the real world parallels. You guys were talking about being kind of surprised at how accurate it was. That didn't surprise me based on when it was written, because fascists have no imagination. They always use the same playbook. So the stuff that they were doing in the 30s, they were doing in the 50s, they're doing now as well. Like, they always do the same thing. It's the same song and dance, right? It's always like, extrajudicial prisons, not reading your rights, stormtroopers swooping in, demonizing immigrants and all that. It's the same tired old. They have no imagination, which is why all their media sucks. And that's what we're looking at here. Which is why when they get pissed off about something like this, because they want to be part of the cultural conversation, but they can't be because they have no imagination and they can't write for Jack.
My goodness. Now I totally lost what I was gonna say. Oh my God. Oh wow. Okay. And so let's talk about, gosh, why is this making me laugh so hard? Okay. Okay. I think we've ended that conversation about the real world parallels, which was really, striking to me. But you're right about that. It very much feels like, exactly like what we've seen before, just in a different iteration. It's just funny how close the time, the timing, I guess, is what really got to me. But that was one thing that made it real. But another thing about Superman that made this really good and it really real for me is something that Staci mentioned a little bit earlier about, one thing that I'm glad that they didn't do was the whole Lois and Clark and then Lois and Superman and then them getting together. They're already together. But not only are they already together, but they're already together and they're already arguing with each other, which is so real. I like that. And also they're also kind of hiding it, but not really hiding it. So that's the other kind of thing that goes around, is that, who knows that Clark is Superman, and who knows that Lois is with Superman, and because there's this whole thing kind of throughout, right? And then Guy Gardner, the Green Lantern that's here, just basically spilled the beans to somebody that he didn't even really know if he's still.
Okay, I have a question. This is probably for Perry because of the comic books and everything. His glasses, maybe I missed that, but was it always been hypno glasses?
Okay. This is
Oh,
another
the
problem I
hypno
had with the movie.
glasses. Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna get started now.
I don't think that's, yeah. Go ahead,
No,
Perry.
it is from the comics, actually,
Okay.
but it was like from like one comic story that's no longer in continuity anymore. So the hypnoglass, it was like this idea that they came up with, and it was used like one time, and it was never really used after that. And so, like, for
Okay.
the most part, in most modern versions, like, it's not hypno glasses or anything. It's the whole performance as Clark Kent, right? The greatest special effect in Superman the movie was when Christopher Reeve changes from Clark to Superman in that one scene in Lois's apartment, right? He takes off the glasses and he like straightens up and his voice changes, and you can see him physically transform in that moment. Then when you see that scene, you're like, oh, now I see why this disguise works. So
It's a personality change,
it's a
more
personality
than
change. It's
what we see.
right. It's not just the glasses. It's everything.
Perception.
It's the perception. Like he wears like suits that are like 2 sizes too big to make him look smaller. He hunches over. He speaks in like in a higher register and all this kind of stuff. So it's all that working together is what creates Clark Kent. So the hypno glasses thing, I hate that. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. But I have a headcanon for this as well. Like, my headcanon is that, because like every Superman fan knows, you're always going to get people who are going to be like, how do the glasses work? How can people, nobody know? And it's like, all right, here we go. I have to explain this again and again. And so I imagine, in my head canon, I'm imagining like Superman explaining it to Guy, and Guy constantly asks, but it's just glasses. How come nobody can tell? and then Superman just getting exhausted and just being like, actually, they're hypno glasses. And then
Because
Diaz
that's like
like,
when I
and
heard
then,
that, I was like,
and then
Guy
later,
Gardner is
I imagine him telling Lois, he's like, so look, he's like, you won't believe what happened today. I was hanging out. I told him about it, and he was like, and he was not buying the glasses thing. So I told him it was hypno glasses, and he bought it. So that's my headcanon for it. And that because Lois even kind of like rolls her eyes when he mentions the hypno glasses. So my headcanon is that this is a joke. Superman played on Guy, and Lois is just going along with it.
Which is good because Guy is such a jerk. Anyway.
And I imagine, Guy Gardner is someone who would buy that. So I totally imagine
he
that
totally would.
Yeah.
He totally would. I mean, oh gosh.
We will continue this discussion on our next episode. Make sure you're subscribed to Nerdy Romantics Podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and visit nerdyromanticspodcast.com to subscribe to our newsletter, where you can get show notes directly in your inbox. Thank you for listening.